The message arrived without music or ceremony. It was a flat voice from a distant chamber, translated into clean Earth speech and sent to every major city at once. It named itself the Galactic Council and delivered a set of orders as if reading a grocery list. Earth would surrender political control, disarm its fleets, hand over its scientific archives, and pay tribute in raw resources. The voice did not threaten. It did not need to. It spoke like a judge who had stamped the same sentence on 100 worlds before breakfast. In Washington, the emergency room inside the old stone building filled with quiet people and humming screens. President Laura Harris stood at the far end of the table and did not sit. She listened as advisors explained charts and risks and historical examples from other planets. The numbers were grim. The Council fielded more ships than Earth had factories. It had decades of experience breaking coalitions, seizing starports, and absorbing resistance. Yet the president's face stayed calm, as if she were reading weather that everyone expected but no one liked. Captain Daniel Brooks waited near the wall with his hands behind his back. He was fresh from the orbital yards and still smelled faintly of machine oil and recycled air. He did not try to speak first. He let the room breathe. He let the tension coil and settle. When the intelligence director finished a careful explanation of why surrender would save lives in the short term, Daniel raised one finger. He did not argue with the data. He only added facts that were never placed on slides. The yards were further along than anyone outside the inner circle guessed. The quiet stations past Neptune were not empty. The prototypes that everyone called rumors were not rumors. They had crews. They had drills. They had teeth. Across the ocean in a lab dug into a hillside, Dr. Rebecca Miles checked the status of a system that looked like a ring of night. She had built the first model years earlier while everyone else argued about budgets. The new model floated between magnetic pillars and sang in a pitch too low for human ears. When she glanced at the Council ultimatum on her screen, she did not feel shock. She felt a familiar kind of pressure, like a teacher asking for a project a week early. She adjusted the field coils and told her team to double-test the safety interlocks. If the sky turned angry, the ring would need to be perfect. News anchors tried to keep their voices steady. Commentators debated words like prudence, delay, and strategic patience. Some said Earth should buy time. Others said Earth should bend to survive. In a small diner outside Denver, a line cook named Evan Cole turned up the volume and then turned it back down. The regulars looked from the screen to their coffee mugs and back to the screen again. People had learned to worry without shouting. They had practiced it for years in smaller ways, in personal storms. No one liked being told to kneel. The feeling was simple. It fit in a chest and sat there like a stone. On the Pacific, a carrier rolled with the water and traced a slow oval under a pale sun. Below decks, pilots walked the cramped corridors and tapped checklists with dull pencils. The ship looked normal from the outside. Up close, it was not normal. New rails ran along the launch track. The nose cones in the racks were not the usual shape. The deck chief, a woman named Maria Lopez, counted crews with a habit that sounded like soft prayer. She did not pray for easy days. She prayed for clear ones. If the order came, the crews would not have time for speeches. Back in the Capitol, the room finally turned to the president. Laura Harris asked for quiet. She asked the staff to leave everything on the table and step out for 10 minutes. When the doors closed, the heavy noise of machines faded, and the human noise settled into breathing. She asked the core group one question. If Earth refused, could they hold the first day? The second, maybe. The third, if luck smiled. Could they make the Council doubt the script it had used 100 times? Daniel Brooks said yes. Not because he felt brave, because he knew the people who had built the tools, because he had watched them fail 100 small tests and get up 101 times. She nodded and called the staff back in. She did not rehearse. She did not ask for a line edit. She recorded a single message to be sent back to the cold chamber that had sentenced them. It was short. It was plain. She said Earth respected the Council's history and the lives of its member species. She said Earth would not surrender its home, its people, or its future. She said Earth would open channels to discuss trade and law, but not chains and tribute. She ended with a small line that no one had approved and no one later forgot. She said Earth would meet its neighbors with a smile. The press office blinked. The legal team blinked. Daniel felt the corner of his mouth move without permission. The reply from the Council did not arrive that day. It did not need to. Everyone knew what would follow. In rooms where sunlight never reached, planners updated files with names like Gate Defense, Jovian Cordon, and Winter Stockpile. Quiet freighters left harbors after dark and crossed the sky with their lights dimmed. A string of yard workers from Nevada to Madagascar received messages that used short words and long lists. They smiled at the lists. Lists meant action. Lists meant someone believed they could do the job. At the lunar shipyards, Admiral Karen Doyle walked the length of a dry dock and ran her hand along the skin of a new hull. The hull was not beautiful. It was rough, dark, and built for abuse. She liked it that way. She paused beside a small team fixing a seam near the bow. The youngest welder looked up with nervous eyes. Karen asked her name. The welder said Lily Grant and tried not to stare. Karen told Lily that the seam she was fixing would carry a line that mattered more than most people would ever know. If it held, a crew would live to see their children again. Lily checked the seam twice more and said thank you without looking away from her work. On a farm in Iowa, a teenager named Noah Carter led his father through a field of taller-than-usual corn and pointed at the sky every time a bright dot moved. He had built a small radio from parts he ordered at random and tuned it to bands that were not meant for him. He did not understand the codes, but he understood cadence. The voices up there were steady, not frantic. He took comfort in the tone. He did not know the names of the people making that tone. He did not need to. It was enough to know someone was awake at the wheel. Rebecca Miles finished her third pass through the ring system and put a hand on the console like a doctor feeling the pulse of a patient. Her deputy asked if she believed the council would attack right away. She said bullies often like to give a victim time to be afraid. The deputy asked if she was afraid. She said yes, but the fear sat beside focus the way rain sits beside a roof. The roof still does its work. She sent a quiet note to Daniel with numbers that looked dull until they did not. If a fleet crossed into the outer system, the ring could make their path very strange. Not a weapon by itself, but a hand on the scale. That night, the president walked on the south lawn with a coat draped over her arm and looked up at a moon that looked the same as always. A guard kept a polite distance. She thought about school books that had once called the stars empty. She thought about the first time a family in a small apartment watched a live stream from a camera, 100 million miles from home. She thought about the people who would not see another spring if she chose wrong. She did not think of surrender as an option. It did not feel like a choice. It felt like canceling a story before the second chapter. Daniel returned to orbit. The station window showed Earth as a round idea you could hold in two hands. He spoke to crews by line. He did not make promises about ease. He promised purpose. He told pilots their job was to buy hours for scientists. He told engineers their job was to buy hours for pilots. He told the cooks their job was to buy hours for everyone by keeping food hot and simple and on time. He told them hours were the real currency now. Every hour earned meant a system finished a test. A shield took one more step. A family put one more bag in the shelter and then laughed because they knew they were overdoing it and wanted to feel brave anyway. When dawn rolled over the deserts and the cities and the green lines of rivers, the world looked unchanged. But the change was there, under the skin. It lived in checklists and in the eyes of people who had decided to stand. It lived in the quiet way neighbors shared tools without making a big show of it. It lived in the small jokes that keep hands from shaking. The council would come. It would bring its old script and expect the same ending it had written for so many others. Earth had chosen its own ending. It would open the door with steady hands and meet whatever stood there with a smile that said both welcome and no. No banners were raised. No parades filled the streets. The first part of the story was made of tiny acts that almost no one would remember on their own. A loose bolt tightened. A map corrected. A battery swapped before it failed. A message sent to a miner who had not spoken to his sister in years, asking if she needed help with the roof before the rains. The sum of those acts had a weight the council could not see from its marble hall. That weight was called home, and everyone carried a piece of it, and together they were hard to move. By the time the sun dropped again, the message to the stars had already traveled past Mars. It did not carry anger. It carried a line that felt like the center of a human palm when it closes around a tool. We will not surrender. They will. The days after Earth's refusal passed in a strange calm. The Galactic Council's ultimatum hung in the air like a storm cloud that never moved. Everyone knew lightning would strike, but no one knew when. The council was silent, but silence was its own kind of message. It meant the fleets were coming. It meant the scripts of conquest were being prepared. On Earth, people went about their lives, but each act carried weight. Each sunrise felt borrowed. Each night carried whispers about the future. Captain Daniel Brooks spent his mornings in orbit. He walked through narrow halls of the command ship, checking crew readiness, asking simple questions, and listening to answers that carried both nerves and pride. He knew the council had numbers beyond imagination, yet numbers did not frighten him. What mattered was resolve. He had seen how ordinary humans, given a cause, could hold ground no one thought possible. In the mess hall, a young pilot asked him if the council's ships were really as strong as the story said. Daniel answered simply, "Strong ships still break if you hit them hard enough." President Laura Harris carried herself with steady calm. Behind her calm was exhaustion, but she never let it show. She held constant meetings with advisors, military leaders, and scientists. Every evening she read messages from citizens. Some begged her to reconsider. Others thanked her for standing firm. A letter from a school in Kansas reached her desk. Children had drawn rockets and stars with the words, "Don't give up." She pinned the letter on the wall of her office. When she looked at it, she felt the weight of choice, but also the truth of purpose. Giving up was not an option. In the lunar yards, Admiral Karen Doyle walked across scaffolding where sparks flew from welders' torches. She knew time was short. Crews worked double shifts. Men and women who had never left Earth now learned how to build ships that would fight beyond Saturn. The Admiral spoke to the crews not with speeches but with presence. She stopped to check seams, to thank welders, to offer corrections in a patient voice. She wanted them to know their work mattered, that each bolt carried the life of someone they might never meet. When her officers asked her if the yards would finish on time, she always said yes. Doubt was a disease she would not allow to spread. Dr. Rebecca Miles slept little. Her work with the strange ring system was now critical. The device had the power to distort paths of ships in deep space, to bend travel like a hand pushing water. It was not a weapon in the usual sense, but it was an advantage. She explained to her team that they were not just building a machine. They were giving Earth time. Time was the most valuable thing. A day more could mean a shield completed, a ship repaired, a family evacuated. Her team understood. They worked with quiet focus, every calculation triple-checked, every coil examined. In her private moments, Rebecca felt fear, but she hid it behind her determination. Ordinary citizens found small ways to help. In New York, machinists turned workshops into production lines for spare parts. In rural towns, farmers donated fuel and supplies. Students built small drones for reconnaissance, guided by simple blueprints distributed online. Families opened their homes to those relocated from high-risk areas near ports or defense stations. It was not just a war effort. It was survival tied to dignity. People understood the scale of the enemy, but they refused to believe that scale alone determined the outcome. Daniel spent long hours speaking with his officers. He told them that humanity had one advantage the Council did not: unpredictability. The Council had grown used to patterns, to scripts that ended the same way. Humans did not follow scripts. They laughed in the face of fear. They improvised when plans failed, and they adapted faster than logic predicted. He reminded his officers of history on Earth itself, of smaller nations facing empires, of ordinary soldiers holding lines against overwhelming odds. His words were not about victory. They were about belief. Belief that they could endure long enough to turn the tide. Far across the stars in chambers humans could not see, the Galactic Council prepared. Alien delegates argued in their languages, but all agreed on one thing: Earth had insulted them. No one refused the Council. No one smiled when ordered to kneel. Earth would serve as an example. Fleets of silver dreadnoughts gathered at staging worlds. Commanders issued orders with practiced indifference. They did not plan battles. They planned demonstrations of power. Earth was to be broken quickly, to send a message to others who might dare to resist. Back on Earth, Laura Harris received secret reports of the Council's fleet movements. Each report was heavier than the last. Numbers of ships, types of weapons, formations that filled entire star maps. She read them without flinching. Fear was natural, but she could not afford to show it. In her speeches to the public, she spoke in clear, simple words. She told them that Earth was not alone, not because of allies, but because of each other. She said they would face the storm together, and storms always passed. Her speeches were replayed in schools, in factories, in military barracks. People listened not for promises of safety, but for proof that their leaders still believed. In a quiet neighborhood in Chicago, a retired engineer named Paul Turner rebuilt an old radio array in his backyard. He listened to coded transmissions from deep space. He logged signals and sent them to military analysts. He had no uniform, no office, but his work mattered. His granddaughter asked him why he worked so hard when he should rest. He told her simply, "Because this is our home." The answer was enough. Across the world, countless small acts added up, threads weaving into a fabric of resistance. As the days stretched on, the waiting became its own battle. Soldiers trained harder. Civilians prepared shelters. Scientists tested systems again and again. No one knew the exact hour the council would strike, but everyone felt it in the air. On the night side of the Earth, Daniel stood at a viewport looking down at the blue curve of his planet. He thought of his parents still living in a small town. He thought of the children who had written that letter to the president. He thought of the countless people who would never know his name but would depend on his choices. He smiled, not out of arrogance but out of defiance. The council expected fear. They would meet something different. On the lunar surface, Admiral Doyle inspected a nearly completed carrier. She watched as crews installed the final railgun arrays. The weapon was massive, stretching the length of the ship, designed to hurl tungsten rods at speeds that no shield could easily withstand. She placed her hand on the metal and whispered to herself. She had no religion, but she believed in work, in steel, in the hands that shaped them. She believed those hands could change destiny. Rebecca Miles sent her final calculations to command. The ring system was ready for deployment. It could bend the path of ships entering the solar system, creating confusion, breaking formations, and buying precious time. She knew it would not win the war by itself, but it was a seed of doubt planted in the council's certainty. And doubt, once planted, could grow. Laura Harris gathered her closest advisors in the war room once more. She looked at each of them in turn, Daniel, Doyle, Rebecca, Hayes, and others whose names would never be famous. She told them that the time for waiting was nearly over. She asked them not for perfection, but for courage. She said courage was the one thing the council could never calculate. They agreed not with cheers, but with nods that carried steel. Beyond Neptune, the first council scouts entered the system. Machines detected their signals. Alarms whispered through hidden bases. Humanity did not panic. Humanity prepared. Lights on control boards flickered alive. Crews strapped into seats. Engines rumbled to life. The storm was coming, but Earth no longer waited in fear. It stood ready, steady and unwilling to kneel. And somewhere in the cold black between stars, the council's armada began its long burn toward the blue planet that had dared to smile. The first council scouts crossed into the system like shadows. They did not fire. They did not announce themselves. They drifted between planets, watching and recording. Earth's hidden stations caught their movements and marked them on screens. Every blip of light was a warning. Humanity knew the storm was no longer waiting. It was here. Captain Daniel Brooks stood in the command center of his flagship. The crew worked in silence, eyes fixed on glowing panels. Reports came in steady. Scouts near Neptune, more near Uranus, another cluster drifting past Saturn. Daniel gave calm orders. No chasing, no rushing. The council wanted them to panic. Instead, he told his officers to hold positions and prepare. Patience was their shield. Surprise would be their sword. On Earth, President Laura Harris addressed the world. Her face appeared on screens in homes, schools, and crowded markets. She told the people that the first wave had entered the solar system. She did not promise easy days ahead. She promised honesty. She promised to fight for every hour, for every life. She ended her speech with a quiet line. "We will not kneel." The words spread through the streets. Some painted them on walls. Others whispered them to children at night. In every corner of the world, those words became a kind of shield. At the lunar yards, Admiral Karen Doyle walked the length of a new carrier. It had finished its first trials only days earlier. She watched as crews loaded the hangars with drones, fighters, and supplies. She reminded her officers that their task was not to defeat the enemy in a single blow, but to hold, to endure, to make the enemy bleed time. She told them that time was Earth's ally. The council had patience measured in orders. Humans had patience measured in survival. Dr. Rebecca Miles activated the ring system for the first real test. Out in the black beyond Neptune, a silent wave spread like ripples on a pond. The scouts drifting near suddenly veered off course. Their engines corrected, but the data they carried was scrambled. They would report chaos instead of clarity. Rebecca exhaled. Her team clapped softly. It was only the beginning, but it proved the machine could bend the sky. When she reported to command, she spoke simply, "It works." In small towns and cities, people continued their quiet work. Workshops hammered out parts for ships. Schools taught children lessons by day and trained them in shelters by night. Musicians played in streets to keep spirits high. Families taped windows and stacked supplies. Everyone contributed something. The sense of waiting was heavy, but the sense of unity was stronger. The scouts left, carrying their broken data back to the council. Weeks later, the true invasion force arrived. Thousands of ships pierced the dark. They glowed with alien power, massive and sleek, built from centuries of conquest. Their weapons were strong enough to tear cities from planets. Their commanders had never known real defeat. They believed Earth was another lesson, another example to terrify others. They did not understand that Earth was different. Daniel watched the first images of the invasion fleet appear on screens. His officers tensed. Some whispered. He raised his voice steady and clear. "They are big. They are strong. But they bleed. And we will show them how." The crew straightened. Fear turned into focus. The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin. Near Jupiter, hidden platforms came alive. Massive railguns rose from their shells and locked onto targets. Drones swarmed from underground bases on the moons. Carriers lifted from shadowed craters. The invasion fleet slowed as it entered the planet's orbit, unaware of the trap waiting for them. When the first alien cruisers fired on a decoy satellite, Daniel gave the order. The platforms fired. A storm of metal rods cut through space. Alien shields flared, cracked, and burst. Ships that had survived 100 wars exploded in silence. The council was shocked. Reports filled their channels, filled with disbelief. Earth had struck first, and Earth had struck hard. Commanders ordered counterattacks, but their formations wavered. The ring system bent their paths again, throwing ships into collisions. The invasion was no longer a march. It was chaos. Admiral Doyle launched her fighters from the lunar fleet. Swarms of drones darted like insects, overwhelming alien interceptors. Human pilots flew with daring moves, dodging blasts that should have ended them. One squadron led by Lieutenant Sarah Green cut straight through a line of frigates, leaving wreckage spinning. Sarah's voice on the comm was steady, even cheerful. She joked as she flew, her laughter cutting through fear. Her courage carried others forward. On Earth's surface, General Patrick Hayes commanded the ground defenses. Missile platforms hidden in mountains launched salvos at alien ships trying to descend. Shields lit the skies. Explosions echoed across continents. Civilians watched from shelters, holding hands, listening to the thunder above. Every strike from the ground reminded them that Earth was fighting back. Rebecca Miles monitored the ring system as alien reinforcements poured in. The strain on the device was immense. Coils overheated. Power grids flickered. Her team scrambled to keep it running. At one point, the main field collapsed. An alien formation regained order and prepared to strike. Rebecca herself crawled into the maintenance chamber, hands shaking, and replaced the burnt conduits. Sparks bit her skin, but she did not stop. The field roared back to life. The alien formation fractured again. Her deputy said she had saved the system. She answered only, "I saved time." As the battle raged, Daniel's flagship faced a dreadnought 3 times its size. Alien cannons lit the void with blazing fire. His crew held their ground. Railguns spat back in steady rhythm. At the last moment, Daniel ordered a risky maneuver. Diving under the dreadnought's belly, the railguns fired point blank. Armor split. The massive ship erupted in light. The crew cheered. Daniel simply nodded and said, "Next one." The invasion force pressed harder, throwing more ships into the fight. But for every strike, humanity struck back. The council had expected an easy conquest. Instead, they faced an enemy who refused to kneel, who fought with stubborn resolve, who smiled even in fire. Hours turned into days. The solar system itself became a battlefield, every planet and moon a piece of the defense. On the 3rd day, Laura Harris addressed the world again. She spoke from a bunker deep below the Capitol, but her voice carried across the planet. She told them the fight was hard, that sacrifices had been made, but that Earth still stood. She told them the Council could not break their spirit. Her words gave courage to the weary, to the afraid, to the grieving. She ended with the same words as before. We will not kneel. In orbit, Daniel heard her speech replayed. His crew listened too. Some wiped tears. Others clenched fists. They fought harder. They held the line. The council commanders could not understand what they faced. They had numbers, weapons, and history on their side. Yet every human strike carried something more: belief. Belief in home, belief in freedom, belief that no script written by outsiders could decide their fate. The council realized too late that Earth was not just another world. Earth was a wall built from countless small acts, countless stubborn hearts, countless smiles in the face of fear. And as the smoke of shattered fleets drifted through the void, humanity's smile had turned into a roar. The battle spread across the solar system like fire on dry grass. Every planet, every moon, every hidden base became part of the struggle. The Galactic Council had sent its might, confident of an easy victory, but Earth refused to yield. What began as defense turned into defiance, and defiance turned into fierce survival. Captain Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge of his flagship, eyes fixed on the tactical screens. Alien fleets pressed hard, wave after wave, their weapons striking with blinding force. Human ships broke, some fell, but others held the line with stubborn resolve. Daniel gave orders with a steady voice, never raising it, never letting his crew feel the weight of fear. Each order was clear, simple, and carried the same message. We hold. Admiral Karen Doyle's lunar squadron surged into battle again and again. Her fighters cut through enemy lines, drones swarmed alien frigates, and carriers launched fresh waves even as they burned. She coordinated with Daniel, moving pieces across the vast battlefield like a chess game played with lives. She knew losses were heavy, but she also knew every hour bought Earth time, and time was victory in its own way. Dr. Rebecca Miles and her team fought their own battle far from the explosions. The ring system strained under the weight of alien fleets. Each wave bent space-time in unpredictable ways, scattering formations, breaking timing, and forcing alien commanders to recalculate. Rebecca's hands were burned, her team exhausted, but none of them left their posts. They poured everything into keeping the system alive. Every time a dreadnought drifted off course and was destroyed, Rebecca reminded herself that it was worth it. On Earth, General Patrick Hayes commanded ground forces. Alien ships that tried to descend faced missile fire from mountains, railgun platforms hidden in deserts, and drone swarms rising from underground bunkers. Cities shook with thunder as explosions filled the sky, but the people did not break. In shelters, families held hands, whispered prayers, and listened to the distant roar of humanity's defiance. President Laura Harris never left the command bunker, though she was urged to evacuate. She insisted her place was with her people. She listened to reports of casualties, of victories, of close calls that ended in survival. She sent messages to crews, to soldiers, to families waiting underground. Her words were not lofty. They were simple. We stand, we fight. We do not kneel. Those words spread like fire, repeated on every channel, spoken in every language. The Galactic Council could not understand what it faced. Their ships were superior, their numbers greater, yet Earth refused to fall. Alien commanders sent frustrated reports to their council leaders. They could not explain how smaller ships struck so effectively, how crude railguns ripped through shields, how human fighters refused to retreat even when surrounded. One commander remarked bitterly that humans fought like storms, unpredictable, wild, and impossible to contain. Daniel Brooks led a daring strike near Saturn's rings. His fleet hid among the ice and rock, using the debris as cover. When an alien formation approached, confident of an easy sweep, Daniel ordered the attack. Railguns fired from behind cover, fighters darted from the shadows, and the aliens were torn apart in the chaos. His crew cheered as the enemy burned, but Daniel only said, "Prepare for the next one." Victory was never final. It was only another step. Admiral Doyle's carriers faced their own trial when an alien dreadnought broke through defenses near the moon. Its weapons aimed at Earth itself. She ordered her carriers forward, launching every drone she had left. The sky lit with fire as drones swarmed the dreadnought, overwhelming its defenses. Finally, a railgun strike from her flagship pierced its core, and the massive vessel exploded in silence. The admiral leaned against her console, exhausted but proud. She whispered to herself, "Not today." On Earth's surface, Hayes coordinated a desperate stand near the Rockies. Alien dropships tried to land, but missile batteries struck them mid-descent. When some broke through, ground soldiers engaged with grit and fury. They were farmers, students, factory workers turned defenders, but they fought with a strength born of protecting home. Hayes moved among them, giving orders, offering courage. Every alien that fell reminded him why they could not surrender. Rebecca Miles faced a critical moment when the ring system's core threatened to collapse. If it failed, the aliens would regain full control of their formations. She made the choice to overload the auxiliary systems, knowing it could destroy the entire facility. Sparks rained as circuits melted, but the device held just long enough to scatter another wave of invaders. When the crisis passed, Rebecca collapsed against the console, whispering, "We bought another day." Laura Harris received the casualty lists each morning. She read every name, no matter how long the lists grew. Advisors begged her to stop, but she insisted. "If they can give their lives," she said, "I can give them my eyes." She carried the weight of every name into her speeches. When she spoke to the world, her voice carried both grief and pride. People heard truth in her tone. They knew she was one of them, suffering with them, standing with them. The Council's armada began to falter. Losses piled higher than expected. Formations shattered again and again. Alien morale dipped. They were not used to long wars. They were not used to enemies who laughed while bleeding. Human pilots sang songs over comms as they fought. Soldiers joked even under fire. Crews painted smiles on the sides of their ships, defiance carved in steel. Daniel Brooks received word of a massive counterattack aimed directly at his fleet. He gathered his officers and told them the truth. They mean to break us. They think we are tired. They think we are ready to fall. We will show them wrong. His fleet braced for the assault. The aliens came in force, a wall of ships blotting out the stars. Daniel's ships met them head-on. The battle raged for hours. His flagship was struck, alarms blaring, hull burning, but still it fought. At last, a railgun shot pierced the enemy flagship and the formation collapsed. Daniel leaned on the console, sweat on his brow, and said quietly, "Still here." Admiral Doyle's forces joined Daniel soon after, combining fleets battered but unbroken. Together, they pushed the enemy back from Jupiter's orbit. The Council had not expected to lose ground. For the first time, their commanders hesitated. Reports spread through their ranks of human defiance, of leaders who smiled under fire, of soldiers who refused to surrender even in death. Fear crept into alien hearts. On Earth, Hayes looked at the battered mountains and the scorched fields, but he also saw people still standing. He walked among civilians who had fought side by side with soldiers, handing out supplies, helping the wounded, carrying the dead with dignity. He told them, "This is what it means to be human. We bend, but we do not break." Rebecca's ring system finally gave out, collapsing in a storm of sparks and smoke. Her team barely escaped as the facility burned. Yet she smiled through the exhaustion. It had lasted longer than anyone dreamed. It had given humanity the time it needed. She looked at the stars and whispered, "Now it is your turn." President Harris stood once more before the cameras. She spoke of losses, of pain, but also of pride. She told the world that the Council's fleets were not invincible, that they could be beaten, that they already had been beaten. Her words spread to every shelter, every ship, every station. People rose with renewed strength. They believed not because they were told to, but because they had seen the truth with their own eyes. The battle of the solar system had not ended, but the tide had shifted. The Galactic Council had come expecting a quick surrender. Instead, they found a people who refused to kneel. They found ships that fought past breaking, soldiers who held lines with bare hands, leaders who stood unshaken. They found humanity smiling in the face of fire, and as the Council's fleets retreated to regroup, every human heart carried the same thought. This was not the end. This was the beginning. The smoke of broken ships drifted through the dark of space. Wreckage spun silently around Jupiter, Saturn, and the moons that had become battlegrounds. For days, the Galactic Council's fleets had poured into the solar system, certain of victory. But now their advance slowed, their formations weakened, and their confidence cracked. Humanity still stood. Humanity still fought, and most of all, humanity still refused to kneel. Captain Daniel Brooks sat at the command chair of his battered flagship. Fires had been put out, but the scars of battle remained. His crew was tired, eyes heavy, uniforms torn, but none asked to stop. When reports came in that alien fleets were gathering again near Neptune, Daniel straightened. His voice carried over the comm. They think we are broken. Let us show them the truth. The crew answered with steady nods. Words were no longer needed. They all understood. Admiral Karen Doyle gathered what remained of her carriers. Many were damaged, some beyond repair, but those that still floated in the void were made ready once again. She ordered new waves of drones to be built from scraps, from spare parts, from anything that could be welded into wings. Crews worked without pause. They slept in shifts on hangar floors. The Admiral herself never rested more than an hour, moving from one deck to another, reminding each sailor that their fight was not finished. She carried herself with calm fire, and the sailors followed her with loyalty stronger than fear. Dr. Rebecca Miles stood in the ruins of the Ring facility. The machine that had bent spacetime was gone, its coils melted, its power exhausted. But Rebecca did not mourn. She had given Earth the time it needed. Now she turned her mind to new tasks. In a temporary lab built in a shelter, she and her team pored over wreckage from fallen alien ships. Each shard was a clue, each piece of tech a chance to learn. They think we cannot match them, she told her team. Then let us learn faster than they imagine. Her words ignited new resolve in the tired scientists. On Earth's surface, General Patrick Hayes oversaw defenses stretched thin. Entire mountain ranges had been reshaped into fortresses, rivers redirected to hide missile silos, and cities reinforced with layers of steel and determination. Alien landers still tried to touch down, but each attempt was met with fire. Civilians and soldiers worked side by side. Farmers delivered fuel to bases. Teachers guided children into shelters before joining civil defense crews. Hayes moved among them, offering his voice where strength wavered. Every strike we give reminds them why they cannot win, he said again and again. His words were simple, but they carried weight. President Laura Harris watched all of this unfold through endless streams of reports. Her face was pale, her eyes lined with exhaustion, but she refused to leave her post. When some advisors suggested peace talks, she shook her head. We cannot kneel now. If we kneel, all who died for nothing. She believed those words deep in her soul. She carried them into every speech she gave. To the world, she became not only a leader, but also a symbol of endurance. The Galactic Council itself was shaken. In chambers filled with alien voices, the news of Earth's resistance echoed. Delegates who had once spoken with pride now whispered with fear. Some demanded more fleets. Others warned that more losses would embolden other worlds to resist. They could not understand why humans had not surrendered. No species had ever refused for so long. No species had ever smiled while bleeding. Earth was rewriting the script of conquest, and the Council did not know how to respond. The final wave came like a storm. Massive fleets gathered near Neptune and burned toward Earth with fury. Their goal was clear: crush the humans completely, no matter the cost. It was the largest force the Council had ever sent against a single world. Daniel Brooks received the reports and knew this would be the deciding moment. He stood before his crew and spoke with quiet strength. This is the test. This is the day they will remember us by. Let us make sure they never forget. Admiral Doyle positioned her battered carriers in orbit near Earth. She had no illusions of safety. She knew many ships would not return, but she also knew their sacrifice could turn the tide. She told her captains to fight with all they had, to hold nothing back. Each nodded, their eyes reflecting the same resolve. They would give everything to defend their home. Rebecca Miles coordinated with command, sending every discovery from alien wreckage to engineers and weapons crews. New shielding techniques improvised from scraps of alien tech were rushed into use. New targeting algorithms gave railguns sharper aim. In weeks, humanity had learned what should have taken years. Rebecca smiled through her exhaustion. We are fast learners, she whispered. General Hayes prepared Earth's final line of defense. Missile silos opened. Railguns rose from hidden bunkers. Cities emptied into shelters, leaving behind skeleton crews ready to fight if needed. Hayes walked the lines, shaking hands, thanking soldiers, reminding them why they stood. This is our soil, he said. No one takes it from us. His soldiers answered with steady silence, their eyes hard with resolve. The Council fleet entered the inner system. The sky filled with fire. Alien dreadnoughts unleashed waves of plasma, turning space into storms of light. Human fleets met them with railgun storms and swarms of drones. Ships burned, both alien and human. The void became a graveyard of courage. Daniel's flagship cut through enemy lines again and again, its hull torn, its guns blazing. Admiral Doyle's carriers launched every drone, emptying their hangars until nothing was left but wreckage and hope. On the ground, alien strikes lit the sky, but Hayes's defenses answered. Missiles tore through landing craft. Railguns struck cruisers overhead. Civilians in shelters held their breath, hearing the thunder above. And still, Earth stood. Rebecca Miles sent one final breakthrough to Daniel. A targeting pattern taken from alien wreckage could pierce the shields of the largest dreadnoughts. Daniel seized the chance. His fleet concentrated fire on the enemy flagship, the heart of the invasion. The railguns struck in rhythm, pounding the same point again and again. At last the shield cracked. The final shot tore through and the massive vessel erupted in a storm of fire. The enemy fleet faltered, confusion spreading. Daniel saw the moment. "Push them back," he shouted. Human ships, battered and burning, surged forward. They drove into the enemy lines, tearing through fractured formations. Doyle's remaining carriers rammed alien ships when their weapons were spent. Crews gave their lives without hesitation, knowing their sacrifice carried weight. Hayes's ground defenses roared louder, missiles streaking into the sky, turning alien fire into broken sparks. The Council fleet broke. What was meant to be a crushing victory became retreat. Ships turned, fleeing the system, leaving behind wreckage, defeat, and silence. Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had faced the greatest power in the galaxy and refused to fall. When the last alien ship vanished beyond Neptune, a strange quiet filled the system. Fires still burned, wreckage still floated, but the enemy was gone. On Earth, shelters opened. People stepped into the light, blinking at the sun, tears running down their faces. They had survived. They had stood. They had smiled through fire. President Laura Harris addressed the world one last time. Her voice was tired, but her eyes carried light. She spoke of losses, of pain, of the cost they had paid, but she also spoke of pride. "We were told to kneel," she said. "We refused. We were told to surrender. We smiled instead. And now the galaxy knows. Humanity stands." Her words echoed beyond Earth. Across distant worlds, oppressed species listened. They whispered of the humans who fought the Council and won. They began to dream of their own freedom. Seeds of rebellion were planted in the shadows. Daniel Brooks looked out from his battered flagship at the Earth below. He thought of his crew, of Admiral Doyle, of Rebecca, of Hayes, of the President, of all who had given everything. He knew the fight was not over. The Council would return, but he also knew something had changed forever. Humanity had proven itself. Humanity had become a force the galaxy could not ignore. Admiral Doyle stood on the deck of her damaged carrier, watching the sunrise over Earth. She felt pride deeper than exhaustion. "We held," she whispered. Her crew smiled through their tears. Rebecca Miles leaned against a console in her ruined lab, already sketching ideas for new defenses. Hayes walked through the battered lines, shaking hands, honoring the fallen, reminding the living that their fight had meaning. And across the world, people lifted their heads high. They had faced the storm and they had not broken. The Galactic Council had ordered Earth's surrender. Humanity had refused with a smile that the galaxy would never forget.